Hey, I'm Kat and today I have for you a true crime case, a word in Romanian, and I will also be doing my makeup at the same time, of course. But before we get started, okay, the word in Romanian is Anglia. 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 Well done, guys, you just said England. Now I have 10,000 disclaimers before we get the video started, only because I actually recorded this video yesterday, and before recording the video I actually fiddled with all the settings, and when I went to edit the video it was all blurry. Needless to say, I was absolutely gutted because my makeup turned out great, it turned out amazing, and when I saw that I thought to myself, I'm never gonna pull off this makeup again. So I was really gutted, but I'm hoping I can kind of redo it. If not, towards the end of the video I'm gonna show you the original makeup which I did yesterday, because luckily after I recorded the video yesterday on my camera, I took a TikTok as well on my phone with the same makeup. So yeah, I have a video with the makeup. So yeah, I was just gutted. Please excuse my eyebrows, I'm trying to grow them out so they will be looking really bad for the next year or so until they properly grow back, because I'm trying to reshape them. Right, oh my god guys, this story, this case is absolutely gruesome, beyond gruesome I might say, so just a trigger warning there. And also I will be showing you photos of the crime scenes at the time, which I'm hoping that they are the original photos rather than some kind of creations over the years, right? But as far as I can see from the photos, they seem to be authentic to the time. Okay, so has anybody not heard of Jack the Ripper? Please do tell me in the comment section down below. I mean, as a true crime creator, I have wanted for so long to cover the case of Jack the Ripper, but I tried avoiding it because there's just too much speculation out there for me to even begin sifting through all of that information for my research. But I have some new stuff and I'm so excited to share this with you. But first, of course, we kind of need the background, right? Because we can't just jump in the middle of it. Okay, 19th century England. In the 1800s, many Irish people moved to England, especially to the East End of London. They added to the large number of people already living in the city. Another group of immigrants came from Eastern Europe, mostly Jews, who were escaping from Russia and other places. They also settled in the East End in Whitechapel. At the time, Whitechapel was very crowded, with about 80,000 people living there by 1888. The living and working conditions were really bad, and many people were poor. More than half of the children born in the East End did not live past 5 years old. There was a lot of crime, violence and alcohol problems, and many women had to sell their bodies to make enough money to survive. Whitechapel, a place in the East End of London, had many brothels and prostitutes in October 1888. The London Metropolitan Police actually counted 62 brothels and 1,200 women who sold sex there. The place was also very crowded, with around 8,500 people sleeping in cheap lodgings every single night. Some people paid 4 pence for a coffin bed, and some paid 2 pence for a lean-to or hangover rope stretched across the dormitory. The financial difficulties in Whitechapel were accompanied by a gradual increase in social tensions. Between 1886 and 1889, frequent demonstrations led to police intervention and public unrest, such as Bloody Sunday in 1887. The public perception of Whitechapel as a notorious den of immorality was influenced by anti-Semitism, crime, nativism, racism, social disturbance, and severe deprivation. Okay, let me put these plasters on because I don't have tape, and it seems that if I don't have a guide, I just don't get the proper shape done, so I don't know. These perceptions were reinforced in 1888 when the media gave unprecedented coverage to the series of vicious and grotesque murders attributed to Jack the Ripper. The large number of attacks against women in the East End during this time brings questions to how many victims were actually murdered by the same individual. 11 murders between 3rd of April 1888 to 13th of February 1891 were included in a Metropolitan Police investigation and were known collectively as the Whitechapel murders. 5 of the 11 Whitechapel murders, known as the Canonical Five, are believed to be the work of Jack the Ripper. They were called the Canonical Five because all the victims were brutally murdered using the same MO. Deep slash wounds to the throat, extensive abdominal and genital area mutilation, the removal of internal organs, and progressive facial mutilations are the distinctive features of Jack the Ripper's MO. The first two cases in the Whitechapel murders file, Emma Elizabeth Smith and Martha Tabram, are not included in the Canonical Five. Emma was robbed and sexually assaulted in Osborne Street, Whitechapel at around 1:30 a.m. on 3rd of April 1888. Her face was bludgeoned and she had a cut to her ear. A blunt object was inserted into her private area, rupturing her peritoneum. She developed peritonitis and died the next day at London Hospital. Emma said that she was attacked by 2 or 3 men, one of whom she described as a teenager. This attack was linked to the later murders by the media, but most authorities attribute Emma's murder to general gang violence unrelated to the Ripper case. The other victim, Martha Tabram, was murdered on a staircase landing in George Yard, Whitechapel on 7th of August 1888. She suffered 39 stab wounds to her throat, lungs, heart, spleen, liver, stomach and abdomen, with additional knife wounds inflicted to her breasts and also her private area. All but one of her wounds had been inflicted with a bladed instrument such as a penknife, and with one exception, all the wounds were inflicted by a right-handed person. Martha was not raped. The brutality of Martha's murder, without an obvious motive and with the closeness of the location and date to the later Ripper murders, this led police to link this murder to those later committed by Jack the Ripper. However, this one is very different because although Martha was stabbed numerous times, she didn't have any slash wounds to her throat and abdomen, and many experts don't connect Martha's murder with the later murders because of the difference in patterns. The Canonical Five Ripper victims are Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes and Mary Jane Kelly. The body of Mary Ann Nichols was found at around 3:40 a.m. on Friday 31st of August 1888 in Bucks Row, which is now Dorward Street, Whitechapel. She was last seen alive around 1 hour before her body was discovered by Mrs. Emily Holland. They previously shared a bed at a common lodging house in Thrall Street, Spitalfields. Mary's throat was severed by 2 deep cuts, one of which completely severed all the tissue down to the vertebrae. Her private area was stabbed twice. The lower part of her abdomen was partly ripped open by a deep wound, causing her bowels to protrude. Several other incisions to both sides of her abdomen were also caused by the same knife. Each of them were inflicted in a downward thrusting manner. 1 week later, on Saturday, 8th of September 1888, the body of Annie Chapman was discovered at 6 a.m. near the steps to the doorway of the backyard of 29 Hambury Street, Spitalfields. Her throat was severed by 2 deep cuts. Her abdomen was cut entirely open, with a section of the flesh from her stomach being placed on her left shoulder and another section of skin and flesh with her small intestines being removed and placed above her right shoulder. Her autopsy also revealed that her uterus and section of her bladder and private area had been removed. There was an inquest following her murder, and at this inquest, Elizabeth Long described seeing Annie standing outside 29 Hanbury Street at around 5:30 a.m. She was in the company of a dark-haired man wearing a brown deerstalker hat and dark overcoat of a shabby, genteel appearance. According to the eyewitness, the man asked Annie, "Will you?" to which she replied yes. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes were both killed in the morning of Sunday, 30th of September 1888. Elizabeth's body was discovered at around 1 a.m. in Dudfield's yard off Burner Street, now called Henriques Street in Whitechapel. The cause of death was a single clear-cut incision measuring 6 inches across her neck, which severed her left carotid artery and her trachea before ending beneath the right jaw. Without any other mutilations to her body, it was unclear if her murder was committed by Jack the Ripper, or maybe he was interrupted during the attack. Several witnesses later told police that they saw Elizabeth in the company of a man close to Burner Street on the evening of 29th of September and in the early hours of 30th of September, but each witness gave different description. Some said that the man had fair skin, others said that the man had dark skin, and some said that he was poorly dressed, whilst others said that he was well dressed. Catherine's body was found in a corner of Mitre Square in the city of London 3/4 of an hour after the discovery of the body of Elizabeth Stride. Her throat was severed from ear to ear and her abdomen was ripped open by a long, deep and jagged wound before her intestines were placed over her right shoulder, with a section of intestine completely detached and placed between her body and left arm. The left kidney and the major part of her uterus was removed and her face was disfigured, her nose severed, her cheek slashed, and cuts measuring 1/4 of an inch and a half vertically incised through each of her eyelids. A triangular incision, the apex of which pointed towards her eye, was also carved on each of her cheeks, and the section of the auricle and lobe of her right ear was later recovered from her clothing. The police surgeon who conducted the post-mortem on Catherine's body stated that, in his opinion, these mutilations would have taken at least 5 minutes to complete. A local cigarette man called Joseph Lowend passed by a narrow walkway to Mitre Square called Church Passage with 2 friends shortly before the murder. He later described seeing a fair-haired man of medium build with a poor appearance with a woman who may have been Catherine. His companions were unable to confirm his description. The murders of Elizabeth and Catherine became known as the double event. It is possible that the killer was interrupted when he killed Elizabeth. That's why there were no mutilations on her body, because he actually had enough time to go to the second location where Catherine was killed. The distance between Henriques Street and Mitre Square is only 700 yards walking, which would take around 15 minutes. And maybe when he killed Catherine, he kind of compensated in terms of the injuries. A section of Catherine's bloodied apron was found at the entrance to a tenement in Goulston Street, Whitechapel, at 2:55 a.m. An inscription in chalk on the wall directly above this apron read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." This became known as the Goulston Street graffito. The message seemed to imply that a Jew or Jews in general were responsible for the series of murders, but it's unclear if it was written by the murderer or it was just incidental and had nothing to do with the case. These inscriptions or graffiti were quite common in Whitechapel. Police Commissioner Charles Warren was concerned that the graffiti might spark anti-Semitic riots, and so he ordered for this to be washed away before dawn. The extensively mutilated and disemboweled body of Mary Jane Kelly was discovered lying on the bed in the single room where she lived at 13 Miller's Court off Dorset Street at 10:45 a.m. on Friday, 9th of November 1888. Her face was hacked beyond all recognition. Her throat was severed down to the spine and the abdomen was almost emptied of its organs. Her uterus, kidneys, and one breast were placed under her head, and other internal organs were placed inside her foot, around the bed, and sections of her abdomen and her thighs on a bedside table. The heart was actually missing from the crime scene. Ashes found within the fireplace suggested that Mary Jane's murderer burned several items to get light into the room as he mutilated her body. A recent fire had been severe enough to melt the solder between a kettle and its spout, which fell into the grate of the fireplace. Each of the 5 murders were carried out at night or close to the weekend, either at the end of a month or a week. As time went on, the mutilations became more and more severe, except for Elizabeth Stride, whose attacker may have been interrupted. Mary Ann Nichols had no organs missing. Annie Chapman's uterus and sections of her bladder and intimate area were missing. Catherine Eddowes' uterus and left kidney were removed and her face mutilated. Mary Jane Kelly's body was extensively eviscerated, with her face gashed in all directions and the tissue of her neck being severed to the bone, although the heart was the only body organ missing from the crime scene. The belief that these 5 murders were committed by the same individual comes from contemporaneous documents which link them together and exclude them from the others. The canonical 5 victims were linked together in a letter written by police surgeon Thomas Bond to Robert Anderson, the head of the London CID, on 10th of November 1888. Dr. Percy Clark, assistant to the examining pathologist George Baxter Phillips, linked only 3 of the murders and believed that the others were perpetrated by weak-minded individuals induced to emulate the crime, in other words, by copycats. Mary Jane Kelly is considered to be Jack the Ripper's final victim, and it's believed that the murders ended because of the killer's death, imprisonment, institutionalization, or emigration. The Whitechapel murders file mentions another 4 murders which happened after the canonical 5. The murders of Rose Mylett, Alice Mackenzie, the Pinchin Street Torso, and Francis Coles. The strangled body of 26-year-old Rose Mylett was found in Clark's Yard, High Street, Poplar, on 20th of December 1888. There was no sign of a struggle, and the police believe that either she hanged herself accidentally with her collar while being drunk or that she killed herself. However, faint markings left by a cord on one side of her neck suggested that she was actually strangled. After the inquest into Rose's death, the jury returned a verdict of murder. Alice Mackenzie was murdered after midnight on 17th of July 1889 in Castle Alley, Whitechapel. She suffered 2 stab wounds to her neck and her left carotid artery was severed. Several minor bruises and cuts were found on her body, which also bore a 7-inch long superficial wound extending from her left breast to her navel. One of the examining pathologists, Thomas Bond, believed this to be a Ripper murder, but his colleague George Baxter Phillips, who had examined the bodies of 3 previous victims, disagreed. Some writers believe that Alice's murderer copied the MO of Jack the Ripper to deflect suspicion from himself, and other writers think that Alice's murder was committed by the actual Jack the Ripper. The Pinchin Street Torso was a decomposing, headless and legless torso of an unidentified woman aged between 30 and 40 years old, discovered under a railway arch in Pinchin Street, Whitechapel, on 10th of September 1889. Bruising to the victim's back, hip and arm indicated that she had been extensively beaten shortly before her death. Her abdomen was also extensively mutilated, although her genitals had no wounds. She appeared to have been killed approximately 1 day before she was discovered. The dismembered sections of the body are believed to have been transported to the railway arch hidden under an old chemise. At 2:15 a.m. on 13th of February 1891, Police Constable Ernest Thompson discovered a 25-year-old prostitute called Frances Coles lying under a railway arch at Swallow Gardens, Whitechapel. Her throat was deeply cut, but her body had not been mutilated, leading some to believe that the police constable actually disturbed the attacker. Frances was found alive, but sadly she died before medical help could arrive. A 53-year-old stoker, James Thomas Sadler, was seen earlier drinking with Frances, and the two are known to have argued around 3 hours before her death. So he was arrested by police and he was charged with her murder. For a very short time, he was believed to be Jack the Ripper, but he was later discharged from court for lack of evidence on 3rd of March 1891. Apart from the 11 Whitechapel murders, other attacks have been linked to Jack the Ripper. A 38-year-old widow called Annie Millwood was admitted to the Whitechapel workhouse infirmary with stab wounds to her legs and lower torso on 25th of February 1888, saying that she had been attacked with a clasp knife by an unknown man. She was later discharged but then died from apparently natural causes on 31st of March. Annie was later speculated to have been Jack the Ripper's first victim, although this attack cannot be definitively linked to Jack the Ripper. Another suspected victim before the canonical 5 was a young dressmaker called Ada Wilson, who survived being stabbed twice in the neck with a clasp knife on the doorstep of her home in Bow on 28th of March 1888. Another possible victim, 40-year-old Annie Farmer, who lived at the same lodging house as Martha Tabram, reported an attack on 21st of November 1888. She received a superficial cut to her throat. Even though an unknown man with blood on his mouth and hands ran out of this lodging house shouting, "Look at what she has done," before two eyewitnesses heard Annie scream, her wound was superficial and possibly self-inflicted. On 2nd of October 1888, a headless torso of a woman was discovered in the basement of the new Metropolitan Police headquarters being built in Whitehall. The discovery was later called the Whitehall Mystery. An arm and shoulder belonging to the body were previously discovered floating in the River Thames near Pimlico on 11th of September, and the left leg was discovered buried near where the torso was found on 17th of October. The other limbs and head were never recovered and the body was never identified. The mutilations were similar to those in the Pinchin Street torso case, where the legs and head were severed but not the arms. Both the Whitehall Mystery and the Pinchin Street case may have been part of a series of murders known as the Thames Mysteries, committed by a single serial killer nicknamed the Torso Killer. The MO of the Torso Killer was different from that of Jack the Ripper, and police at the time discounted any connection between them. Only one of the 4 victims linked to the Torso Killer, Elizabeth Jackson, was ever identified. She was a 24-year-old prostitute from Chelsea whose body parts were collected from the River Thames over a 3-week period between 31st of May and 25th of June 1889. Oh, by the way, I wanted to tell you that this time I have not been using a beauty filter or a smoothing filter for my video. So it was only at the beginning, like the first few seconds of the video, so you can kind of, see the difference, because I can guarantee you that none of the video creators out there are creating videos without using a filter, because it's impossible for us not to have any pores or any spots, or for our skin to be smooth and perfect even after applying makeup. So I just wanted to show you the difference, and today in my editing I'm not using a beauty filter or a smoothing filter for this exact purpose, because I don't want you thinking that, oh my god, her skin is perfect, oh my god, her makeup is perfect, there are no pores, there are no marks, there are no nothing. It's nothing like that. The only reason why I personally use the beauty filter is because I have a lot of spots on my skin, on my face, and also a lot of redness, and I'm very self-conscious, and yeah, it kind of makes me feel a bit better if I use the beauty filter. But by no means my skin is perfect, because it's very far from perfect. Like I said, I have a lot of spider veins on my face, a lot of redness, a lot of spots, especially lately I've been having these aging spots pop up on my face. So yeah. Anyway, towards the end, I'm going to show you the makeup look with the beauty filter on as well, just so you can kind of see the difference and compare. Okay, moving on. On 29th of December 1888, the body of a 7-year-old boy named John Gill was found in a stable block in Manningham, Bradford. He had been missing since 27th of December. His legs had been severed, his abdomen opened, his intestines partly drawn out, and his heart and one ear removed. These similarities with Jack the Ripper murders led to speculation in the media that the Ripper killed him. John's employer, 23-year-old milkman William Barrett, was arrested 2 times for the murder, but he was released because of insufficient evidence. No one was prosecuted for the John Gill's murder. Almost all of the City of London's police's file relating to the investigation into the Whitechapel murders were destroyed in the Blitz. The ones that have survived provide a detailed look at Victorian-era investigative procedures. A large team of policemen conducted house-to-house inquiries throughout Whitechapel. Forensic material was collected and examined. Suspects were identified, traced, and either examined more closely or eliminated from the inquiry. And you can probably tell that modern police work kind of, follows the same pattern. More than 2,000 people were interviewed, almost 300 people were investigated, and 80 people were detained. After the murders of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, the Commissioner of the City Police, Sir James Fraser, offered a reward of £500 for the arrest of Jack the Ripper. Throughout the investigation, butchers, slaughterers, surgeons, and physicians were suspected because of the manner of the mutilations. A surviving note from Major Henry Smith, acting Commissioner of the City Police, indicates that the alibis of local butchers and slaughterers were investigated, resulting in them being eliminated from the inquiry. A report from Inspector Swanson to the Home Office confirms that 76 butchers and slaughterers were visited, and the inquiry covered all of their employees for the previous 6 months. Some figures, including Queen Victoria, believed that the pattern of the murders indicated that the individual was a butcher or cattle drover on one of the cattle boats that traveled between London and mainland Europe. Whitechapel was close to the London docks, and boats would dock on Thursday or Friday and depart on Saturday or Sunday. The cattle boats were examined, but the dates of the murders didn't match with any boat's movements, and the transfer of a crewman between boats was also ruled out. In September 1888, a group of volunteer citizens in London's East End formed the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. They patrolled the streets looking for suspicious people. This was because of people being unhappy with the failure of police to catch the killer, and also because some members were concerned that the murders were actually affecting businesses in the area. The committee petitioned the government to raise the reward for information leading to the arrest of the killer, and they offered their own reward of £50 for information leading to his capture, and they hired private detectives to question witnesses independently. At the end of October, Robert Anderson asked Police Surgeon Thomas Bond to give his opinion on the extent of the murderers' surgical skill and knowledge. This would be the earliest surviving offender profile. His assessment was based on his own examination of the most extensively mutilated victim and the post-mortem notes from the 4 previous canonical murders. He wrote that, without a doubt, all 5 murders were committed by the same hand. In the first 4, the throats appear to have been cut from left to right. In the last case, because of the extensive mutilation, it was impossible to say in what direction the fatal cut was made, but arterial blood was found on the wall in splashes close to where the woman's head must have been lying. All the circumstances surrounding the murders led the surgeon to form the opinion that the women were lying down when they were murdered, and in every case the throat was cut first. The surgeon didn't agree that the murderer had any kind of scientific or anatomical knowledge or even the technical knowledge of a butcher or horse slaughterer. In his opinion, the killer was a man of solitary habits, subject to periodical attacks of homicidal and erotic mania, with the character of the mutilations possibly indicating satyriasis. Satyriasis is actually excessive or abnormal sexual craving in the male, something similar to nymphomania. However, nowadays is not recognized anymore as a disorder. Thomas Bond also stated the homicidal impulse may have developed from a revengeful or brooding condition of the mind, or that religious mania may have been the original disease, but I do not think either hypothesis is likely. In addition to contradictions and unreliability of accounts, attempts to identify the murderer are actually affected by the absence of any forensic evidence. DNA analysis on letters is inconclusive. The available material was handled so many times that it's just too contaminated to provide any meaningful results. There have been claims that DNA evidence points conclusively to 2 different people: Aaron Kosminski, a Whitechapel barber, and artist Walter Sickert. Scientists said that Aaron Kosminski was the notorious serial killer. He has been named as the Reaper by researchers from 2 British universities whose findings were published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences. They said that they had identified 2 sets of DNA traces for Aaron Kosminski and one of the Reaper's victims, Catherine Eddowes. Aaron Kosminski was a Polish Jewish immigrant who lived with his 2 brothers and sister in Greenfield Street, around 200 yards from where the 3rd victim, Elizabeth Stride, was killed. They say that they identified the DNA from a shawl found at the crime scene. The shawl was bought by businessman Russell Edwards at auction in 2007, then handed over to the scientists. It was allegedly found next to Catherine's body and was stained with what was believed to be her blood. However, critics claim that there is no evidence that the shawl was found alongside Catherine's body and say that it may have been contaminated over time. The name of Walter Sickert has been linked to the Jack the Ripper murders by quite a few authors and over the years. According to some authors, he was an accomplice in the Whitechapel murders, whilst others depicted him as knowing who was responsible for the crimes and so informing them. But according to the crime novelist Patricia Cornwell in her 2002 book Portrait of a Killer, Jack the Ripper Case Closed, Walter was in fact the man who carried out the crimes. According to her theory, Walter had been made impotent by painful childhood operations for a fistula of the penis. This scarred him emotionally and left him with a pathological hatred of women, which in time led him to carry out the murders. However, there were some doubts about her theory because St. Mark's Hospital, where the operations on Walter were performed, specialized in rectal rather than genital fistulas. Evidence also suggests that Walter was not impotent. His first wife divorced him, citing his adultery in her petition for divorce. He is believed to have had several mistresses and to have fathered at least one illegitimate child. The concentration of Jack the Ripper's killings around weekends and public holidays within a short distance of each other indicated to many that he was employed and he lived locally. Others believed that he was an educated upper-class man, maybe a doctor or an aristocrat who ventured into Whitechapel. Authorities are not agreed on any suspects, and the number of named suspects reached over 100. There were hundreds of letters claimed to have been written by the killer himself. 3 of these in particular are quite interesting: the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jackie postcard, and the From Hell letter. The Dear Boss letter, dated 25th of September and postmarked 27th of September 1888, was received that day by the Central News Agency and was forwarded to Scotland Yard on 29th of September. Initially, it was actually considered a hoax, but when Catherine Meadows was found 3 days after the letter's postmark with a section of one ear obliquely cut from her body, the promise of the author of the letter to clip the lady's ears off gained attention. Catherine's ear appears to have been nicked by the killer incidentally during his attack, and the letter writer's threat to send the ears to the police was never carried out. Most of the letters after this one copied this letter's tone, with some authors adopting nicknames like George the High Rip Gang and Jack Sheridan the Ripper. The Saucy Jackie postcard was postmarked 1st of October 1888 and was received the same day by the Central News Agency. The handwriting was similar to the Dear Boss letter and mentioned the canonical murders committed on 30th of September, which the author refers to by writing double event this time. It has been argued that the postcard was posted before the murders were publicized, making it unlikely that a person would have such knowledge of the crime. However, it was postmarked more than 24 hours after the killings happened, after details of the murders were known and publicized by journalists, and they became general community gossip by the residents of Whitechapel. The From Hell letter was received by George Lusk, leader of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, on 16th of October 1888. The handwriting and style is not like that of the Dear Boss letter and Saucy Jackie postcard. The letter came with a small box in which George Lusk discovered half of a human kidney preserved in ethanol. Catherine's left kidney was removed by her killer. The writer claimed that he fried and ate the missing kidney half. But there is disagreement over the kidney. Some say that yes, it belonged to Catherine, others argue that it was just a practical joke. The kidney was examined by Dr. Thomas Openshaw of the London Hospital, who determined that it was human and it was from the left side, but he could not determine any other biological characteristics. After his examination, he also received a letter signed Jack the Ripper. Now, Jack the Ripper was not the first serial killer, but his case was the first to create a worldwide media frenzy. The nature of the Ripper murders and the poor lifestyle of the victims drew attention to the living conditions in the East End and incited public opinion against the overcrowded insanitary slums. In the 2 decades after the murders, the worst of the slums were cleared and demolished, but the streets and some buildings survive, and the legend of the Ripper is still promoted by various guided tours of the murder sites and other locations connected to the case. Now, as recent as 16th of July 2023, a former police volunteer claims to have discovered the identity of Jack the Ripper. Sarah Bex Horton, whose great-grandfather was a policeman, during the Ripper investigation, found compelling evidence that matches witness descriptions of the man seen with female victims shortly before they were stabbed to death in 1888. Her detective work led her to Hyam Hyams, who lived in an area at the center of the murders and who was a cigar maker, so he knew how to use a knife. He was an epileptic and an alcoholic who was in and out of mental asylums, his condition worsening after he was injured in an accident and unable to work. He repeatedly assaulted his wife, paranoid that she was cheating on him, and he was eventually arrested after he attacked her and his mother with a chopper, which I believe is a knife for chopping food. Sarah gained access to his medical records and she discovered some details there. She told the Telegraph, quote, "For the first time in history, Jack the Ripper can be identified as Chaim Hyams using distinctive physical characteristics," end of quote. Witnesses described a man in his mid-30s with a stiff arm and an irregular gait with bent knees, and Sarah discovered that the medical notes of Chaim, who was 35 years old in 1888, recorded an injury that left him unable to bend or extend his left arm, as well as an irregular gait and an inability to straighten his knees with asymmetric foot dragging. He also had the most severe form of epilepsy with regular seizures. Chaim's medical notes, taken from various infirmaries and asylums, reveal that his mental and physical decline coincided with the Ripper's killing period escalating between him breaking his left arm in February 1888 and his permanent committal in September 1889. According to Sarah, that escalation path matched the increasing violence of the murders. He was particularly violent after his severe epileptic fits, which explains the frequency of the murders. She added, "In the files it said what the eyewitnesses said, that he had a peculiar gait. He was weak at the knees and wasn't fully extending his legs. When he walked, he had a kind of shuffling gait, which was probably a side effect of some brain damage as a result of his epilepsy." Witness accounts of the man's height and weight were similar to the details in his medical files. Witnesses saw a man of medium height and build, between 5 feet 5 inches and 5 feet 8 inches tall, stout and broad-shouldered. Chaim was 5 foot 7.5 inches and he weighed 10 stone 7 pounds. His photograph demonstrates that he was broad-shouldered. Sarah concluded that Chaim's physical and mental decline, along with his alcoholism, triggered him to kill. The murder stopped at the end of 1888, around the same time that Chaim was picked up by the police as a wandering lunatic. In 1889, he was incarcerated in the Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum, North London, until his death in 1913. Jack the Ripper never struck again. Chaim was on a long list of around 100 suspects, but he was discounted because he was misidentified. Sarah said that when she tried to identify the correct Chaim Hyams, she found around 5. Chaim Hyams has never before been fully explored as a Ripper suspect. What makes Sarah's research particularly interesting is that it was prompted by her chance discovery in 2017 that her own great-great-grandfather Harry Garrett was a Metropolitan Police sergeant at Leman Street Police Station, the headquarters of the Ripper investigation. He was posted there from January 1888 until 1896. Sarah Bex Horton, who read English and modern languages at Oxford University, is a retired civil servant who volunteered with the City of London Police for almost 2 decades until 2020. She had no idea of her ancestors' history until she began researching her family, and she actually found herself studying the Ripper case. She will now present her extensive evidence in a book titled One-Armed Jack, Uncovering the Real Jack the Ripper, to be published by Michael O'Meara Books next month, I believe in August. The book is written in tribute to her ancestor and his police colleagues. Paul Bagg, a leading Ripper authority, endorsed the book, saying, "This is a well-researched, well-written, and long-needed book-length examination of a likely suspect. If you have an idea of the sort of man Jack the Ripper might have been, Chaim Hyams could be it." So, yeah, I know that there is overall a lot of information out there, and I just condensed this into this video. Like I said, I didn't want to get into every single thing, specifically because there is no way that I can verify if things I find online are accurate, or they are speculations, or perhaps stories, you know, made up over time. So that's why, to begin with, as I said in the beginning of this video, I didn't really want to cover Jack the Ripper, but the only reason why I did it now was because of these Hyams. So yeah, this is all that I got for you. Now you know the murders in detail, right? So what do you think? Do you think that Hyam was Jack the Ripper? To me, and this is the reason why I did this video, it kind of sounds likely. However, to be honest with you, I'm not entirely convinced. Jack the Ripper, he mutilated his victims, right? He removed internal organs, he severed the bodies, he removed parts of the skin. He would have needed strength to do it. I'm not sure that, you know, Hyam, with his medical conditions, could have pulled this off, especially because he had a broken hand. He had extensive epilepsy, and on top of that, he also had problems with his legs. So I really don't know. I mean, is it possible that, you know, he was right-handed? I mean, we know that the killer was right-handed because of the way that he slit the victim's throat. So he slit from the left to the right, which clearly indicates that he's right-handed, right? So is there a possibility because Hyam, say for example, his dominant hand would have been his right hand. He didn't use his left hand as much anyway, so even though he was injured, he could have kind of compensated the strength to his right hand, because I think that we all know you have more strength in your dominant hand than you do in your other hand, right? But again, I don't know guys, because it just seems kind of unbelievable to me that a killer with an injured hand and with legs that he can't bend, right, would be capable of dismembering and mutilating the victims as the victims were mutilated in this case, and to be done by an individual who is not particularly 100% healthy, if you get what I mean. But I'm not sure, honestly I'm not sure, but I'm just in doubt that he could be the one, although it's quite possible that yes, he could be the one, because he was a cigar maker, so he knew his way around with a knife, and he kind of needed strength, you know, to be a cigar maker. So again, it kind of makes sense, but then on the other hand, it kind of doesn't make sense. But oh, I'm confused. Please do let me know, guys, what do you think in the comment section down below. But lastly, before I go, I do have a question for you. After having heard all the gruesome details of the murders, do you think that this is suitable to be taught in school to 10-11-year-olds? Because this is what my daughter learned in school when she was that age, and I'm not just talking generally, oh, Jack the Ripper, he was a serial killer in London. I'm talking very detailed, gruesome details, just like the ones that I have told you about. So she came home from school with her homework on that day, and I read her homework and I was just shocked. Even I wasn't aware. I knew the mutilations and, you know, gory details, but even I wasn't aware of the full extent of, you know, the crime scenes and the injuries and everything else. And apparently it was part of their curriculum, in school, in history, I believe, to learn this. Yet, on the other hand, they only taught her that sex is for babies, and anything more than that was deemed inappropriate to be taught to children her age in reference to sexual education. With that, honestly, I didn't agree. My daughter, she was quite young when she got her period the first time, so she was around the same age, 11 years old, when she got her period. And yes, even though I do agree and accept that not all children develop at the same, you know, at the same, oh my god, I can't find my words. They don't develop at the same age, and not all of the girls at her age would have had their period, but still, they could have taught her more than just that sex equal babies, if you know what I mean. They could have done it in an appropriate manner. Me, personally, I didn't accept that she only learned that sex equals babies, having babies, because you can still, find an appropriate way to educate children in sexual education when they start learning about it, of course, and bring in issues such as, sexual transmitted disease, or how to protect yourself, or how, is sex is consensual with someone that you love and someone who loves you back, that they can't force you, that you need to be, over 18 years old and stuff like this, but make it appropriately, but also give them information, because you might have children whose parents are not comfortable to, approach them in this conversation, and that kid, let's say it's a girl, she might grow up with this idea, hold on a minute, sex equals babies. So she's either not going to have sex because she don't want to have babies, and so she's not going to experience what an adult should be experiencing because it's something natural, or she will have sex and she will make babies because she was not aware that there is such thing as protection, and you don't need to have babies by having sex, but you can have sex for pleasure without, having babies, if you get what I mean. Oh my god, did I confuse myself? Did I confuse you? But yeah, anyway, going back to Jack the Ripper, I honestly found it extremely inappropriate for my daughter at 11 years old to be learning in history about Jack the Ripper and the gruesome murders. And again, why is Jack the Ripper even in the history curriculum? Yes, I know that it's a big part of history, but it's not like, an achievement or anything like that. He was a serial killer. Are there many serial killers mentioned in history? I have no idea. I know that, Hitler, yes, but Hitler was different, and all these other, I don't want to get in history, but that's different. Jack the Ripper was, a serial killer. So I don't even understand why he would belong in history lessons. But okay, putting that aside, why would you deem appropriate to teach this to 10, 11-year-olds? In gruesome details. It doesn't make sense. And then on the other hand, you don't teach them enough information about sexual education. It doesn't make sense, guys. It doesn't. I'm gonna stop now because I can ramble forever on this subject here. Okay, now, reaching the end, now I'm gonna show you, this is the makeup, right, without a beauty and smoothing filter on. I'm not sure what you can see from it, but obviously I still have lines, wrinkles, I still have pores. As you can see, is not smooth perfect, and this one here is the one with the beauty filter on. And yeah, now you can kind of see the difference. And now this makeup is done, and this is the makeup that I initially did in the first video, which, by the way, I recorded 2 videos yesterday before I actually realized that they are recording blurry. So 2 videos. I spent about, I think, 3.5 or 4 hours recording yesterday, and at the end of it I've realized that both of the videos were blurry, completely blurry. There was no saving them, so I had to restart today. Okay. Oh my god, why am I talking so much? It feels like I had a ton of coffee today, but I only had one. Oh guys, very quickly, I'm in love with this makeup look. Seriously, I think that this is the best makeup look that I've ever done since I'm doing makeup. Oh, neon green and yellow. What do you guys think? I love it. Oh, I love it. Okay, bye. Okay, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.